Hello and welcome to this English methodology workshop. I am Heidi Healy, the Virtual English Language Fellow, and this workshop is titled The Language Experience Approach. In this workshop, I want to introduce you to what is known as the language experience approach and other methods that we can use for helping our students develop their writing skills. First, just a quick introduction to me. My name, as I said, is Heidi Healy. I am a virtual English language fellow. I was an English language fellow in China from 2017 to 2020. And then I returned home to Utah in the western part of the United States. And I've continued to do teacher training workshops for teachers in China as well as in Mongolia since I've been back in the US. I have my master's degree in teaching English to speakers of other languages, and I've been teaching English both here in the United States and internationally for about 10 years now. I'm really grateful that we can be together to discuss more about how we can help our students develop their writing skills. So I want to start today by talking about mashed potatoes. So Thanksgiving is coming soon in the United States, and one of the traditional foods that we often have is mashed potatoes. You can see a bowl of mashed potatoes here on the table. So let's start by learning some vocabulary we need to know to be able to learn about mashed potatoes. So our vocabulary. We have potatoes, of course, butter, a potato masher, milk, salt, and a pot. A few more vocabulary words are related to the verbs that we need to know about making mashed potatoes. So we have peel, to remove the skin from a fruit or vegetable. Drain, to remove liquid from something by letting it flow away. So if I drain something, it's been cooking in water and I'm going to pour off the water. Boil, to become so hot that bubbles are formed in a liquid and rise to the top. So often in cooking, we will boil water. Your water becomes so hot that it bubbles. Mash is to beat or crush something to smash it so that it becomes soft. And finally, mix, to combine two things so they become one. So we're going to watch a video now about making mashed potatoes. Don't worry about understanding all of the words. Your task is to listen to the video and take some notes about the major steps in making mashed potatoes.
I'm going to show you how to make a nice, creamy, full of flavour mashed potato. And to feed 4 people, you basically need 1 potato per person. So that kind of amount will feed 4. It's roughly sort of 900 grams. Now, the type of potato I'm using is a Maris Piper. You could use Maris, you could use Desiree, you could use King Edward. You want something that's quite floury, something that's going to break up when you cook them, nothing waxy. So when it comes to mashing, you could use one of these. This is a potato ricer. You get a nice fine result from that. But if you don't have one, use the traditional masher. That's what I'm going to use today. So let's peel the potatoes. Start by removing the skin with a potato peeler. And then cut the potatoes into kind of medium, even-sized chunks. And this is really important, otherwise they all cook at different times. Next, place the chunks into a large pan of cold salted water and make sure the pan is large enough to accommodate the potatoes. Then bring them up to the boil, turn it down, and then simmer for around 15 to 20 minutes until the potatoes are soft. Okay, so I think the potatoes are nearly ready, and a good way to check is just to put a knife into one of them, and it runs through nice and smoothly with no resistance, just breaks up, they're done. So these are ready, and they're ready to drain. Pour them into a colander and allow them to steam for a moment or two to remove any excess moisture. And then return the potatoes back to the pan. So these potatoes are now ready to mash. It's really important that you put them over a low heat to keep the potatoes from going cold, because if they go cold, they get really kind of gluey and starchy. So I'm just going to start mashing them really gently, just to break them up a little. And then what you want to do is just pull them to one side. So you've got half the pan of mash, and the other half you can top up with your butter and your milk. So now we can add the butter, push that to the one side that I pushed the potato from, and then in with some milk. And the milk kind of varies a lot, to be honest. You might need more, you might need less, and just keep an eye on it. If you need to add more, just a little splash. But you don't want it too runny and you don't want it too stiff. So the idea is that you're warming up the milk and the butter to the point that you can then mix it together. If you were to add cold butter and cold milk to the warm mashed potato, that wants to set it, it goes starchy and gluey. Okay, so the milk and the butter are now warmed, and then just simply beat the two together. And you don't want to over mash it either, because that again is going to bring out the starch and make the potato gluey. So at this point you could add a number of things: grated cheese, creme fraiche, roasted garlic, even mustard. All would taste really, really nice. Right, this is ready to serve up. Piping hot, creamy, and really simple. That's classic mashed potato.
Okay, we're going to watch the video one more time. Again, remember to just focus on the major ideas. You don't need to understand everything from the video.
I'm going to show you how to make a nice, creamy, full of flavour mashed potato. And to feed 4 people, you basically need 1 potato per person. So that kind of amount will feed 4. It's roughly sort of 900 grams. Now, the type of potato I'm using is a Maris Piper. You could use Maris, you could use Desiree, you could use King Edward. You want something that's quite floury, something that's going to break up when you cook them, nothing waxy. So when it comes to mashing, you could use one of these. This is a potato ricer. You get a nice fine result from that. But if you don't have one, use the traditional masher. That's what I'm going to use today. So let's peel the potatoes. Start by removing the skin with a potato peeler, and then cut the potatoes into kind of medium, even-sized chunks. And this is really important, otherwise they all cook at different times. Next, place the chunks into a large pan of cold salted water, and make sure the pan is large enough to accommodate the potatoes. Then bring them up to the boil, turn it down, and then simmer for around 15 to 20 minutes until the potatoes are soft. Okay, so I think the potatoes are nearly ready, and a good way to check is just to put a knife into one of them, and it runs through nice and smoothly with no resistance, just breaks up, they're done. So these are ready, and they're ready to drain. Pour them into a colander and allow them to steam for a moment or two to remove any excess moisture. And then return the potatoes back to the pan. So these potatoes are now ready to mash. It's really important that you put them over a low heat to keep the potatoes from going cold. If they go cold, they get really kind of gluey and starchy. So I'm just going to start mashing them really gently, just to break them up a little. And then what you want to do is just pull them to one side. So you've got half the pan of mash, and the other half you can top up with your butter and your milk. So now we can add the butter, push that to the one side that I pushed the potato from, and then in with some milk. And the milk kind of varies a lot, to be honest. You might need more, you might need less, and just keep an eye on it. If you need to add more, just a little splash. But you don't want it too runny and you don't want it too stiff. So the idea is that you're warming up the milk and the butter to the point that you can then mix it together. If you were to add cold butter and cold milk to the warm mashed potato, that wants to set it, it goes starchy and gluey. Okay, so the milk and the butter are now warmed, and then just simply beat the two together. And you don't want to over mash it either, because that again is going to bring out the starch and make the potato gluey. So at this point you could add a number of things: grated cheese, creme fraiche, roasted garlic, even mustard. All would taste really, really nice. Right, this is ready to serve up. Piping hot, creamy, and really simple. That's classic mashed potato.
Okay, now you know how to make American style mashed potatoes. So now I would like you to use your notes and just briefly write a short description of how to make mashed potatoes. Again, this doesn't need to be perfect. Just do your very best from what you understood. Feel free to pause the video here and take a couple minutes to write your paragraph about how to make mashed potatoes. I had you write your own paragraph about how to make mashed potatoes. If I was doing this in a class, I might do this as a group writing activity. So we would watch the video a couple of times, and then I would have the students tell me how to make mashed potatoes. And I would write what they said up on the board or on a piece of chart paper, and we would write our own text together as a group. Today I just had you write your own text. Here is my text. So I wrote, to make mashed potatoes, you need potatoes, salt, water, milk, and butter. Peel and cut the potatoes in pieces. Put the potatoes in a pot. Cover the potatoes with cold water. Put the pot on the stove and heat until boiling. Boil for 15 to 20 minutes. Drain the potatoes and let them dry. Use a potato masher to mash the potatoes a little. Add butter and milk to the potatoes and mix well with the potato masher. So I didn't use all the details from the video, and your text is probably different from mine, and that's okay. I wouldn't expect us to write the same thing. But this would be the basic kind of idea that I would be looking for. Now, just by itself, this is a great writing activity. One of the things that can be really challenging about writing is students don't know what to write. We explain to them about how to write, and then we tell them to write, but they don't know what to write. And so this kind of an activity helps students know what to write. They're given the content, they just need to write it into a paragraph or into a text. Once I have my text, I could do many different things with this text to further my students' learning. For example, I could make a gap fill and take out several words that then I could have students put into the text. Another option would be to teach some form of grammar. For example, with this paragraph, I could teach about command form, that when we're giving directions in English, we often drop the subject. So I get peel, put, cover, put, boil, drain, use, add. So I could teach my students about command form. I could also do an ordering sentences activity where I could give students the sentences that they had written from their paragraph, mix them up, and then have them put them back in the right order. Why don't you try this? Can you put the pieces in the right order? Here's the answers. Now, I divided this into lots of sentences. Depending on the level of your students, you might want to chunk the sentences differently. And you could divide your sentences into larger pieces so the students don't have all the individual sentences. I could also teach students about transition words. Often when we're working on process writing, we want to teach students about transition words like first, then, next, second, finally. So I could have students look at our original paragraph, and if we didn't have transition words, we could add transition words into our original paragraph. So here I rewrote the paragraph using transition words. To make mashed potatoes, you need potatoes, salt, water, milk, and butter. First, peel and cut the potatoes in pieces. Then, put the potatoes in a pot and cover the potatoes with cold water. Next, put the pot on the stove and heat until boiling. After boiling for 15 to 20 minutes, drain the potatoes and let them cool. Then, use a potato masher to mash the potatoes a little. Finally, add butter and milk to the potatoes and mix well with the potato masher. What are some other things that you could teach based on your text? I'd love to hear your ideas. Share them in the comment box below. This type of teaching is what is known as LEA, or the language experience approach. It is using a shared experience, in this case, watching a video together, in order to teach language. It's a whole language approach to teaching reading and writing skills, meaning at the beginning, we're focused on the students producing language, not necessarily everything being correct or perfect. And it involves students writing a text based on a personal experience. They're basing their text on this experience that they had. In the case of our lesson, I've been watching a video about making mashed potatoes. Why do we use this approach? This approach is used frequently in elementary schools or primary schools in the United States. And a couple of the benefits of it include it lets us create custom texts that are based on the grammar or vocabulary that we want our students to practice. For example, we could write a text about colors, or we could write a text about a specific grammar we've been talking about, or based on specific vocabulary we've been learning. And this way we can create this experience that is really meaningful for our students. Second, we can create a text that is based on students' experiences, knowledge, and interests. This really adds to motivation. As I discussed in my previous workshop on motivation moments, by engaging our students, by using our students' interests and things that are relevant to them, we help our students be more motivated. And in this case, we are creating a text that the students are helping to create. This gives them ownership, this gives them autonomy, and this can really create motivation for reading and writing. Texts are also at the appropriate level for students. This means that the grammar and the vocabulary is not too difficult or too easy, because the students are producing the words to create the text. So they're going to use the grammar and vocabulary that they know. They might make some mistakes, and that's okay. That's part of this process. But it creates a text that is a really good level for our students. Finally, and I mentioned this previously, doing LEA and other related activities can be really helpful for students to develop their writing skills. Often it can be difficult for students to come up with what to write about. And so this gives them content, they know what to write about. They're going to write about how to make mashed potatoes. They saw a video that shows them all the steps, and now they just need to put the words on the paper. So this is a really good way to help teach students how to start writing when they're just very first starting to write in English. So what different types of experiences might we use if we were using this approach in our classroom? One of them is to watch a video, similar to what we did. And there are lots of different kinds of videos you could base this on. Some of my favorite are cooking videos or how-to videos, where people explain how to do something. One of my favorite series is a series by Chris Hadfield, who is an astronaut, And he has a series of videos where he explains how to do different things in space, such as how to wash your hands in space, or how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in space, things like that. This can be really entertaining for students, and it gives them a content, something to write about. I like to use these kinds of videos when I'm introducing process writing to my students. So we might watch a video, one of these how-to videos. I'll have them write a paragraph about how to do something. And then maybe the next week, I have them write a personal paragraph about how to do something. So maybe we watch the video about how to make a peanut butter and honey sandwich in space. And then the next week, I have them choose a Mongolian food, and I have them write me a paragraph about how to make that food. Another really common way to share an experience is to read a book. There's lots of different books that you can use. A few of my favorite are books that have strong patterns or repetition in them. So one thing that I've used before is alphabet books. I apologize that the text is backwards on these. This is the Icky Bug alphabet book. So an alphabet book is a book that goes through the alphabet. So for example, in my Icky Bug alphabet book, here's the letter L, and the letter L is for ladybug. Here's the letter M, and the letter M is for monarch. So what I could do with this is we read an alphabet book, and then I could have my students create their own alphabet book. So I actually did this with some second graders that I was teaching several years ago, and we created our own ABC book. Again, I apologize that the text is backwards. Each student from my class was given a letter of the alphabet, and then they created a text and a picture with that letter. So this is my student that had F, excuse me. He wrote F is for fish, F is for friend, F is for find, F is for fin, F is for fight, F is for family. And then he drew a picture of a fish. So this was his text for our book. Some other books that I like are books with repeating patterns. So another popular series by the author Lara Numeroff is the If You Give a Mouse a Cookie series. So If You Give a Mouse a Cookie was the first book. She's also written If You Give a Pig a Pancake and If You Give a Moose a Muffin. These are really fun stories that are chain stories. So it starts with a single action. In this case, they give the pig a pancake, and then it goes through all the events that happen because the pig was given a pancake. So for example, if you give a pig a pancake, she'll want some syrup to go with it. So we could start students with an animal and have them write a story with a similar kind of pattern in it. Another example that I've used for this is the classic book by Eric Carle, Brown Bear, What Do You Hear? That's about animals and colors. This could be a great way to introduce writing to really low level or beginner level students, because really all the vocabulary they need is colors, the names of animals, and then the rest of the text just repeats itself. Brown bear, what do you hear? I hear this, right? And the final book I wanted to mention is the book Quick as a Cricket by Audrey Wood. Here's the cover of it. This is a great book where a child describes themselves by talking about different adjectives and animals. So I wanted to read this book really quickly to you. Again, I apologize that the text is backwards in my camera. So Quick as a Cricket by Audrey Wood, illustrated by Don Wood. My book does not want to open. I am quick as a cricket. I'm as slow as a snail. I'm as small as an ant. I'm as large as a whale. I'm as sad as a basset. Basset is a type of dog. I'm as happy as a lark. A lark is a type of bird. I'm as nice as a bunny. I'm as mean as a shark. I'm as cold as a toad. I'm as hot as a fox. I'm as weak as a kitten. I'm as strong as an ox. I'm as loud as a lion. I'm as quiet as a clam. I'm as tough as a rhino. I'm as gentle as a lamb. I'm as brave as a tiger. I'm as shy as a shrimp. I'm as tame as a poodle. I'm as wild as a chimp. I'm as lazy as a lizard. I'm as busy as a bee. Put it all together and you've got me. So if I was doing an activity with this book, I would start by reading the book. Then I might have my students make a list of some adjectives that describe them and maybe some animals that they think of with those adjectives. So for example, you might say, I'm wise. And maybe in the US, we often associate an owl with being wise, or clever as a cat, or strong as an ox, smart as a fox, friendly as a dog. So try this. What are some adjectives that describe you? Are you smart? Are you friendly? Are you clever? And what are some animals that you associate with those adjectives? Now, in the US, as I said, we associate an owl with being wise. But maybe there's a different animal you think of being wise in Mongolia, and that's fine. You would want to personalize this to your students and your place. Once my students had their list of adjectives that described them, I could have my students write their own little story about their animals. So for example, I might give my students a page that looks like this. I have lots of boxes, And I've already wrote in the text I am as a blank. So then I could have my students fill in their own text to write their own little book. For example, I could have students write, I am smart as a, what animal is smart? Maybe you think a cat is smart. So I'm as smart as a cat. The next one, I am what? Maybe I'm going to use small. I'm not very tall, so maybe I'm going to say I am small as a, what's an animal that's very small? When I think of a small animal, I think of a mouse. So I'm as small as a mouse. Or maybe I have a student that feels like they're very tall. So I am tall as, what would be a tall animal? Tall as a giraffe. Or I am tall as, yeah, right? Or maybe I want to say I am strong as an elephant. There's no real right answers here. The idea is we're getting students to start writing. I could then take these little boxes, let the students draw pictures to illustrate their story, cut the boxes apart, staple them together, and students have their own little book in English that they have written that they can take home and read on their own. So this can be a really good way of combining reading and writing and helping students see how we can connect these things and how they can be readers and writers of English. Another thing that you could do is use what is known as a wordless picture book. So I've listed a few of my favorites here. So A Boy, a Dog, and a Frog by Mercer Mayer, Good Dog Carl by Alexandra Day, Pancakes for Breakfast by Tommy De Paula, The Snowman by Raymond Briggs, and Tuesday by David Weisner. These are books that have very few or no words in them. The story is told through pictures. So I could do an LEA experience with my students and have them create the text. For example, if I was going to do the story Pancakes for Breakfast by Tommy De Paula, this is a story about a woman making pancakes for breakfast. First, I might flip through each picture in the book, show the pictures to the students, and have them think about what is happening in the pictures. Then we would read the book again. As I showed them each picture or each page, I would have the students provide the text for me. What is happening in the book? And we could write this together on the board or on a chart paper. Sometimes I might even invite the students to help me write. If students make mistakes like spell a word wrong or make a grammar error, that's okay. When I'm first having them write, I don't worry about their mistakes. I just let them write. Once we have the story written, then we might go back and talk about how we can fix our mistakes. This is a way that I can introduce revising and editing to students. Oh, let's go back now and look at our text and see if all of our verbs are correct, or see if all of our words are spelled correctly. And this can be other good ways to add mini lessons into your language experience approach lesson. Finally, there are lots of other experiences that you could share with students to create content for them to write about. We've talked today about watching a video or reading a book, but you could use other shared experiences. You could use a school sports day, and they could write about the kind of events that happened at the school sports day. In the United States, schools sometimes will take field trips. They'll go to a place in the community to help students learn more about that place. So then when students came back from the field trip, they could write about the place or the experience. One thing that's really important is to make sure to write about a shared experience, something that everyone in the class has done. You don't want one person to feel left out because they don't have the same experience. You could also, if you have older students, write about information from another class. For example, what have students been learning about in their science class or in their history class? If in their science class they've been learning about plants or animals, maybe you could use that as your content. Okay, let's write about plants or let's write about animals now in English. You would need to think about what kind of vocabulary students would need to know, but this could be a way that you could connect ideas for them between what they're learning in other classes and what they're learning in English class. Once we've created our text, we've had our shared experience and we've written our text, whether we wrote a text together as a group or I had students write individual texts, I also want to think about expansion. How can I use this text to teach my students other language skills? I could just have students copy the text that we wrote. This provides a great opportunity to practice handwriting and just practice writing. But it's much more fun and motivating because the students help to create the original text. It's not just a boring text from the textbook. I could make a cloze exercise, some type of gap fill, where I take out important words and have the students try to complete the blanks. I could have students match words with pictures or definitions. For example, if I had a text that I had the names of animals, I could have students match the names of the animals with a picture of the animals. I could use this to teach many of the other language skills I need to teach, such as vocabulary, grammar, or spelling. All of these are possible for me to use my text to teach. I just have to look at my text and think about, what can I teach from what has been written? Can we talk about past tense and make sure all our verbs are in past tense? Can I teach students about spelling patterns or pronunciation? There's lots of different things that I can use a text to teach my students. I could do a dictation exercise. One day we could write the text as a class, and the next day I could read part of the text to the class and have them write down what they hear. This would be a great dictation exercise, but it's something that's a little bit more motivating and interesting to the students because they recognize it as the text they helped create the previous class. I could do a scramble sentences activity, like I showed you with the mashed potatoes example, where I mix up the sentences and the students have to put them back in the right order. Or I could choose one sentence from the text, mix up the words in the sentence, and have the students recreate the sentence. Really, the possibilities are endless. There's so many different things you can do with a text that the students have written. And this is really motivating for students because they're learning things based on something that they wrote, based on something that they have a little bit more ownership of. You can also use this to help develop personal writing. Earlier, I gave the example of how I might use process writing to lead into student process writing. So for example, maybe we watched the video about mashed potatoes and we wrote our text about mashed potatoes. We talked about how to use command form. And then the next week in class, I asked students to write another paragraph and I asked them to choose a popular Mongolian food that I think students probably know how to make this. It's usually good to start with something pretty simple. That's why I used mashed potatoes. And maybe give students 2 or 3 choices. So give them 2 or 3 traditional Mongolian foods that you think they know how to make this, and have them write a paragraph about how to make it. This would be a really easy way to transition from more teacher control of their writing to more student control of their writing. So LEA, the language experience approach, is used to help encourage reading and writing with students. It makes these things very personal, and it can make language education more interesting and more motivating for our students. So, what did you think about this way of teaching? Do you think this is something you could do in your classroom? If so, I would love to hear your ideas. How could you use similar activities in your classroom to help your students develop their abilities to read and write? I'd love you to share your ideas in the comment box on Facebook, or message or share ideas with a friend that's also an English teacher. So let's keep using our Facebook page to interact, ask me questions, share examples, share any ideas or things that you're doing in your classroom that are working well. I'd really love to hear from you. And thank you for watching this video. I know that things are challenging, and I appreciate your dedication to wanting to continue to improve your ability to teach your students. Here are my resources. The definitions and pictures from the mashed potato example came from learnersdictionary.com and Pixabay. One resource I just wanted to quickly point out, this second resource is a book from the American English website that has some other examples of how to do these kinds of activities with your students and then have them write about them to develop writing skills. And again, finally, thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see you at our next English methodology workshop.